Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. This is Between the Lines. Just to remind you, you can contact me through our website or our email or what do they call it, Lloyd? BetweenTheLines.tv?
That is correct.
Yeah. Contact us at BetweenTheLines.tv. Send us an email. I'd prefer if you call so we can engage in an exchange. This way I can allow you the courtesy of follow-up. And just to remind you, you can be on a live radio show with me Monday and Tuesdays. It's WBOB out of Jacksonville, 101.1 FM or 600 AM. You'll be on live, and we can engage in an exchange and try to put our heads together to problem solve instead of banging heads like what is going on currently in the media and our political elected officials. So, the motivation behind this podcasts, these broadcasts, these stations is concern for our children and their future and ultimately the future of this country. To remind everyone, our children are the future of this country. We sure as hell don't act that way. We're always concerned about what you're thinking. My exercise is very simplistic. I want to give you food for thought, to be very candid with you. I want to see if I can induce a thinking process that you stop being spoon-fed a lot of misinformation that's being provided to you by supposedly credible media outlets. And it's very disturbing what's going on, and it's fueling this divide, this animosity, and this polarized state. Interestingly enough, I heard Jen Psaki in a press conference make reference in particular to the borders regarding sex trafficking. Well, if you listen to what I say almost every podcast, there's an organization currently in play. It's called Phantom Rescue. Its leadership is Frank Smith and Tony Sparks. Frank is an attorney. Tony Sparks has a very interesting, colorful background. I'm going to leave it at that. I want to get these two men back on air with me so he can tell you a little bit about his background. I do want to thank Instacart and Buzzsprout for sponsoring us. Just a little insight. We use Buzzsprout. And I personally use Instacart. They're user-friendly. If you're thinking of starting a podcast, give Buzzsprout a look. It's very, very good. And we've set aside some interesting special offers for you. So I would encourage you to pursue them. So without further ado, I want to proceed into fielding some calls and some emails today. And without saying anything further, we're going to get into some calls. The first one's from Chris, who's from Brooklyn, New York, ironically, the place that I was born. Here he is. Hello.
Hi, this is Chris calling in from Brooklyn.
Hey, Chris.
How are you today, Lou?
I'm very well. How come you don't have that heavy Brooklyn accent?
I'm not from Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn.
Where do you live in Brooklyn, buddy?
I live in Kensington, right where Kensington, Midwood, and I guess they call it Ditmas Park now, all intersect.
Yeah, sure. Very familiar. I'm Brooklyn born in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
Yeah, I know.
Brooklyn Hospital, yeah.
Yeah. So my question, Lou, we had, as you're aware, last week there was a subway shooting, and there was all kinds of like the story itself. I don't know how much you've read up on it. Is pretty interesting. Like the shooter couldn't get in with his Metro card, and the agent let him in. And then after he started, they kept running the trains. There just seemed to be a lot of things systemically going wrong that allowed this to happen. How would you think that could be prevented better in the future? And maybe what can we do across the country to help prevent things?
Well,
like
that's
that?
an interesting term you used, mentioning systemic failure. Perhaps the system first failed, Chris, without properly identifying this individual before we allowed him to legally buy a 9mm high-capacity automatic pistol in Ohio. It maybe failed him systemically by not getting him the proper counseling he may have needed, that he alluded to needing. It probably failed by us not instituting some form of boundaries and controls and accessing our subway system. Funny you brought up that term systemic failure because it's resonating through the country. And I promise the producers I don't go off on tangents because they remind me. I do that, Chris, but all these topics intersect, oddly enough.
They do.
Yeah, well, and how I would say going forward you would prevent this is by addressing the common denominator to these massive shootings, whether they're subways, malls, college campuses, movie theaters, wherever it is, and that's to address the mental health issue. And you have to concurrently address the issue of firearms acquisitions in the country. I am I would say, staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, and I lean heavily towards the concerns of the Founding Fathers that we're witnessing currently in the Ukraine. You disarm your populace, you allow them to be prey. Well, ironically, in the Ukraine, what we did to offset that, we flooded the citizenry with weapons, which is unfortunately translated to the Russians rationalizing it's okay to make them targets. But regardless, they're at least in a position to defend themselves, which is, again, going back to the Second Amendment of this Constitution, which isn't really about guns, it's about your freedom. Guns are simply a tool that they realize would always guarantee your freedom, would address tyranny and address a foreign invader. And to remind everyone, after we signed the Declaration of Independence, the British made another run at us in 1812 and burnt the White House, foreign invader. So there's an interesting discussion. I think we have to, at some point in time, develop the courage to address this common denominator to mass shootings. We need to find the decency and civility and to start to talk about how we can offset mentally ill and emotionally disturbed people from getting firearms, which is very doable. I can tell you, Chris, I went out to California in 1989, opened an office and a home, and was in a security business, and I moved to a community called Manhattan Beach, beautiful beachside community. And the chief there was a fellow gentleman, Ernie Clevershall. So I went in to see the chief because I needed a concealed weapons permit issued by his jurisdiction that allowed me to continue my business. I had some very high-profile individuals and events. And the chief made it very simple. You ready? Yep. He said, I'd like you to go through psychological screening. The same person we send LAPD people to and my people to, his Manhattan Beach Police. And in doing so, I took Minnesota multiphasic screening exam. I think it's a new name applied to it, so I'm giving you the name from yesteryear. Rorschach, word association, interview with a psychologist or psychiatrist. I did this every 2 years after my permit had to be renewed. Now, it seems to have worked there. These are not, I would say, perfect, but they would eliminate a lot of, or identify, I should say, a lot of personality disorders in people. And I think it's something we should consider. Part of the problem that we're dealing with today is that we have such opposing views that we can't seem to get to the middle to have this discussion like you and I are having, Chris. Yeah. The NRA's position is if you can see lightning and hear thunder, you should have a gun. Blindly thinking the left or the liberal or Democrats are trying to ban weapons in a country where we have conservatively accounting for 500 million. It just isn't happening. So you need to put your thinking cap on and ask yourself, where's the middle ground? And we don't seem to be able to do that because we're so busy carrying out our political agendas and flexing our muscles and imposing our ways and dealing with our insecurities and our control issues and our esteem that we're throwing our children under the bus.
Exactly.
So, go ahead, Chris.
No, to me, it comes back to something that I've been thinking about and I discuss with my wife a lot when, trying to get the left and the right to work together on something. And they just stick their feet in the mud and not work towards anything. It's almost like a sport, like rooting for sports teams. Like you've got the Red Sox and the Yankees, and they're not going to come together. They're rooting for a team rather than looking for solutions.
What they're really doing is they're overlooking the big discussion, which is how all of these interactions or lack thereof translate to your children. Are you're married, Chris? Is that correct? I hear.
I am married. Yes.
You have children?
I do not have children.
Okay, well, I don't know how to advise you in that regard. That's simply up to you. But no, look at the world we're bringing them into.
Yeah, well, that's part of that. That fuels a big part of our decision.
And so I want to say something to you. You probably sound like you're in your 30s. Am I right?
40s.
40s. Okay. Well, you got another 50 years here of this mayhem. Okay, that's the problem. You're a young man, Chris. You're a young man. So, and your wife's a young lady. and you guys are entitled to something better than this, and that's part of the impetus to doing this show, because we need to change the conversation in this country. The other interesting part of the dynamic is regardless of what topic we're speaking to, we seem to lack civility, decency, and respect for one another. Chris, you and I don't have to agree on everything. I expect you to have potentially an opposing view. It's how we interact with each other.
Yeah.
You know, we have to teach people it's okay when people are different than you are. We're not getting the lessons from the big people. And sadly, the very same things that one day you may teach your children not to do, you're witnessing in the media every day. You know, not for anything, but, you know, I am gravely concerned about Joe Biden in many aspects. Ridiculing him and demeaning him and degrading him does not help the problem. And by the way, it
doesn't address any issues.
No, it doesn't. Look. You know, Chris. I've gone a lifetime of listening to people tell me, you know, what problems we face and who's responsible for them, and poking and picking and prodding at each other. Tell me how you want to fix it, which is what this show's about. Because if you come to me with a problem, I'm going to come to you with the solution, because that's what I've done the majority of my adult life, 49 years of it at least. And that's really where we need to go in this country. And we're absent of these conversations. All we have is posturing and people throwing words around without considering what they translate to and how they further develop animus and polarization and division in this country, all of which the outside world is looking at and taking advantage of, Chris. So, you know, this is for you too, buddy. You're a young guy. You got another 40, 50 years here if you just take care of yourself a little bit and embrace modern medicine proactively. So
I do. That I definitely do.
Well, that's important. You should have a cardiologist at this point. You should have a urologist, and I'm telling you that from experience. You know, are you familiar? Are you a New Yorker, a native New Yorker by chance?
No, I'm from Connecticut originally,
Okay.
and then I went to college here, and now I live here. And yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to NYU.
Yeah, my nephew went there. Yeah, very good school. You know, I was a lifeguard at Jones Beach for 15 years.
No way.
No, listen, let me tell you the importance of the story. We looked like we could hold up the planet on our back like Atlas. You know, at one time we were young men, the expression to have your day in the sun. And, you know, my friends are dropping like flies, not for any other reason that they're not proactively going after medicine. You know, you look like you could hold a house. You're built like that. Meanwhile, you may have some genetic defect in you, heart, asthma, any number of things. You could be prone to stroke. You don't know. You need to go to doctors.
You can't see what's going on inside. You can't read your own genome. You know, you need doctors for that to help you out.
And that's why I said to you, you and your wife both need to start fiddling around, you know, with the doctors. You know, this virus issue we just got through, finally. I think we're through it. I'm not quite sure. I don't know how much more they want to politicize it. But, you know, a lot of people died from pre-existing conditions who were young. I guarantee you they were pre-diabetic. They had pre-existing heart conditions they didn't know of because they hadn't manifested themselves just yet. You know, any number of things, asthma, any number of issues that you're on the cusp of having that precipitated a more, I would say, dramatic outcome from the COVID virus. You have to be proactive with your health. I didn't get on here to do a health show today, but I'm telling you from experience, that's what you need to do. And by the way, I cash every check my mouth writes. I go to doctors that I've been going to them since my 40s preventatively. So I would suggest you undertake that. What do you do for a living, Chris? May I inquire?
Well, currently I work in sales.
Okay.
So
well, I'm selling right now. You know, I'm trying to sell a different narrative to this country other than this garbage we listen to every day from these people who pose as journalists, because that's what a lot of them are doing. They're posing. They're not helping things, Chris, and they're certainly not helping. To go back to your initial question regarding this incident in the subway, you know, we have about a minute left, and I want to just briefly say something to you that's highly relevant. I listened to the mayor speak to this issue that went on in the subway and try to reinforce the need for gun control. That's not the issue here. It's not gun control. It's mental health. Something went wrong in this country not too long ago. Starting Columbine, 1998. Wasn't that long ago. I was there the next day with Sara, the Duchess of York. It's quite a learning experience. But we're sidestepping the heavier lift in this society, and we're trying to bulldoze everybody with nonsense. Chris, stick with me. We're going to come back to you in 1 second. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. I have a young gentleman on the phone from Brooklyn, place where I happen to be born. Chris, you still with me?
Yeah, I'm still with you.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, you've listened to what I've had to say about this issue with the subways and the gun issue a little bit. Where do you stand on the gun issue, Chris, by the way?
On the gun issue, it's like everything else, it's complicated. Excuse me. I firmly believe that people say they want to repeal the Second Amendment. I am not in favor of that, if for only the reason that once you start taking rights away, that's a slippery slope. You take that one away, you take more away, and the next thing you know, your entire freedom's gone. So that's where I am on that. I mean, certainly we can do more with background checks. Are you a supporter of the Second Amendment, Chris? Excuse me?
Do you support the Second Amendment?
I support its right to exist, and I think we should have it, yes.
Do you understand the premise under which it was constructed by our founding fathers?
Well, the way I understand it is we're supposed to have that to protect against tyranny.
And foreign invaders, which is what we're witnessing in the Ukraine right now.
Right.
Ironically. Chris, listen, in a perfect world, we shouldn't need guns.
No.
I have been troubled a good part of my life trying to understand this predisposition of harming each other, which has gone on since the beginning of time. It is obviously some type of defect in man. I used to believe men were intrinsically good. I'm starting to question this right now, folks. And, just to give you a little further background, I graduated St. John's University, and I was a philosophy major. I wasn't exactly Sam the student, but I did pay attention to a lot of other things in life. The thing I do want to point out about this whole gun control issue is that we have more guns in this country than gun laws in this country than I have hair in my head. We do not enforce them. Enforcement addresses gun-related issues. What we are finding out statistically, and this is irrefutable, is that people who legally obtain firearms are not the problem. They're not out committing crimes. We just continuously, intentionally mislead the public as to what the problem is and what the solution is. And I'd be curious to hear what your response to what I just said is.
Well, it made me think back to the other issue, which is mental health. That's something in this country I don't think we've addressed in a long time, starting again with the children from birth. I remember growing up, and mental health and awareness of it wasn't something we even touched on. And if you felt you needed that kind of help, you were kind of frowned on and seen as weak, looking for it. And how can you be a strong person without that kind of support?
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Hey, no, you're right on the money, buddy. We don't positively reinforce you. Go listen to the song "Satisfaction" by the Rolling Stones.
I know the song.
You can't be a man because you don't smoke the same cigarette as me. They critique everything, including your laundry detergent. It lends itself to this lack of positive reinforcement in this society. If you don't wear Hollister, and I have nothing against Hollister or Tommy Bahama, but if you're not strolling around in this clothing, you're not cool, you're not accepted. We have to start to reprogram the thinking of this culture a little bit here. And that's a very broad stroke comment I just made, but you hit right on it, buddy. You have to positively reinforce people. And the thing I do want to tell you also, and you may be young for this, but Geraldo Rivera conducted an expose on Willowbrook, a facility in Staten Island. The treatment of the mentally ill was beyond horrific. Look at how we're treating our veterans, by the way. It was even worse than that.
It's
no.
disgusting.
Listen to me. We closed Pilgrim State and we closed Creedmoor in New York. So where are all those people right now, Chris, by the way? Where do you think they are?
I think they're on the street.
Thank you, buddy. Bing, bing, bing.
I see it all. That's nothing new. That's been going on since, when was Willowbrook?
Probably in the 80s, early 80s. Yeah, right around there.
So that's been going on my whole life. I've seen that, and I've known where that's coming from. And that's like we're talking about. There's so many problems.
These
they
are fixable.
Should be fixable.
These are fixable problems. You know what's so interesting is that we don't hesitate to throw billions of dollars in directions of countries that hate us. I struggle to understand the agenda of this country. When it comes to investing into our own people, we just don't seem to have the resolve or to do it. I don't understand what we're doing here. These are not complicated concepts. Chris, I'm not the smartest guy on the planet. Let me tell you right now. but I have an enormous amount of common sense, and I have an over-analytical brain. It's hard to smell past things by my nose without me smelling them for what they really are. I'm looking at an entire minority community in our country, across this country, that go neglected, but we're doling out billions of dollars to Pakistan, or we're giving back billions and billions of dollars to Iran, which, by the way, is a terrorist nation. Someone has to help me understand what the agenda is in this country. If I didn't know any better, I would swear they're trying to sabotage us. But, Chris, you know what? I got to wrap up real soon. I want to give you the final question or comment, sir.
No, it's just, again, going on this, it feels like, you talk about our government, how we're more interested in helping other countries and our enemies and all that. I have gotten the feeling my entire life that our government, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whatever, the people in power don't care about the citizens, the people. It just seems more about making money for themselves and screw everybody else, let the bottom percent die, and the rest of them take the leftovers.
Unfortunately, you're not far off the mark. They live in a cocoon, and they are completely detached from you, Chris, and you're right about that. And the only way to change that is by voting in people that you believe represent you. And if they don't do or meet your expectation, you need to vote them out. There's no question, and I don't know what your political affiliation is. I have none. I have no loyalty to the Republicans or the Democrats. My love and my loyalty lies with my wife and my children in this country and what's best for them. And that's the way you should feel. This isn't about the Democrats or Republicans. It's about America. And I don't know how we're going to get that thinking process changed unless we start to vote into office people that carry out the agenda you need. You follow me? And my children need. I'm going to hop, skip, and jump through this thing, Chris. I'm that far down the road, and I've got such an education behind me, it sometimes disturbs me. But listen, Chris, I got to let go right now. I would like you to call back in. You've got some very interesting perspectives that I have to tragically say are spot on. It's hard to arbitrate with what you're saying. Your observations are correct.
I'm sad, too.
Well,
but, yeah.
Make sure you call me back, buddy.
This is great. I sure will call in. Thanks a lot, Lou. This has been great.
Thank you, buddy. My pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. We're going to take a quick break, guys. We'll be right back. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're just waiting for a young lady to call in from Cape Cod. Her name is Sara. Hopefully she'll be with us shortly. Hello.
Hi, this is Sara from Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Hi, Sara. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
How's things at the Cape?
It's kind of rainy and dreary today, but
you know what, though, Sara? A bad day there is better than a good day a lot of other places.
That's probably true.
I've been there, Sara. Yeah. Are you a native?
I am.
Oh, you're an anomaly.
I know, right?
So how do you feel about all these people invading Cape Cod in the summertime, making mayhem, whatever it is?
Well, as a true native, I would say what all of us say, which is fall is my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The autumn is a very unique time in this country. Spring is very unique too, but the autumn's got that crispness in the air, and you get your life back a little bit there. But, unfortunately, the economies at places like Cape Cod rely on tourism, like they do in Montauk. I'm sure you're familiar with Montauk.
Oh, yeah,
They're
definitely.
just inundated with people over the summer in the Hamptons. But I gather you called me to ask me a question, not so much to have a discussion about Cape Cod.
I know. I wanted to make small talk.
Let's do small talk. Go ahead.
Lou, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the influence of lobbyists in politics and how it actually influences and really controls the electorate. Or your thoughts on corporate personhood.
Let me just go right to this issue about lobbyists and special interest groups. They are unfortunately, they are overly influencing the agendas of the people that you elect to represent you. What turns out to be is not that they're representing you, but they're representing the money. And that's really the same tie we have to corporate America. we have to change the agenda. We have to eliminate special interest groups and lobbyists. I do not understand what Americans don't understand about people being bought and paid for. I mean, do you see it that way, Sara?
Yes.
You're being bought and paid for. So this is a very simple, basic, fundamental concept that you and I are talking about, but for some reason, we're having a hard time wrapping our arms around the influence of corporate America, special interest groups, and lobbyists. Let's go one step further. These are the very same groups that after they're finished courting our House of Representatives, whisper in their ear, and by the way, when you finish playing congressman, I've got a job over here for you for $1 million a year. If you go back, and I'm not a gigantic Trump supporter, but I want to say one thing that Trump pointed out was that this practice of holding office and then leaving office and then going into these corporate environments, hedge fund groups, etc., was going to stop. He wanted to put a window at the end of your service for like 5 years, if I recall what it was. And Lloyd, I'd like you to fact check me. I'm relying on my producer right now.
I always do.
Thank you.
Always.
Okay. And try to stem the flow of this nonsense, Sara. Look, you obviously have connected that dot. I think a lot of people do. But you know what's interesting? I think we almost feel helpless in trying to figure out how to get this back into alignment.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, what are the solutions? Because I think that there have been people that have addressed it as a concern, but of course they are not going to vote for a bill that goes against their best interests.
And that translates in almost every topic in the country. In other words, to go back historically, when Barack Obama became the president, he needed the support of Southern conservative Democrats, what we call blue dog Democrats now. And a lot of them, constituents, were gun people. Well, I happen to know for fact, because I won't give you too much information, they kind of whispered in his ear, we're going to back you, but don't go near gun control because those are our constituents. That's how we keep our jobs. So everybody's kind of been, I hate to use this term, compromised on some level or another, but this thing about special interest groups and the lobbyists and the monies that exchange hands and the trips to play golf in Arizona and up in Carmel, California, and the private jets is just abusive. And it still goes on. And for whatever reason, we can't seem to get this problem contained. And I don't know a way to do it other than the following. Term limits for openers.
Yeah.
And Trump spoke to that, but here's the problem with term limits. That demographic that has to vote in the term limits, Sara, is the House and the Senate.
Right.
So I want to make sure we understand
people
each
that
other.
want to they want to like die there. So
Well, Bird did. Bird did. West Virginia, he did die there. He died at 92 years old in office. We have Dianne Feinstein right now. She's about 88 years old. And whether I agree with her politically or not, there's nothing to do with it. We all have a shelf life, Sara. You have you have your day in the sun, or as I also say, there are windows of your life. They open and they close. I hate to break it to her, but this political window closed. Nancy Pelosi's closed. Joe Biden, no matter how you feel about him, if we're going to start to talk about his cognitive state, the Democratic Party indicted him. Julian Castro in a Democratic primary was brutal with the president.
Right.
Not the Republicans. They're going after him now because there is some legitimate concern. And the big question today is, who's behind the scenes with him? Is it Obama? Is it Susan Rice? I don't know what to say about this whole political system, but it needs to be cleansed. And I don't know if we have the wherewithal to do it, which is going to translate ultimately to how they perform and how it impacts our kids. I would think that you would have children, Sara. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, I choose not to have children because I have a different philosophy in life in general. I feel like if it's hard for myself to have the same opportunities that my parents had, then I probably shouldn't bring another human being into the planet. I'm very self-reliant, and I consider myself a philosophical anarchist. I know right from wrong. I do not cause harm to anyone. And I don't believe I need the government to tell that to me either.
Yeah, you're right about that, Sara. And I have to say something. I wish I could argue with your position of not bringing children into the world.
Right.
You have to look at what you're bringing them into. You know,
Exactly.
and we are failing the American people, and most grievously, we are failing our children, and we're going to deprive them of a future they should have that's peaceful. I don't know where you lie in the demographic of age. Doesn't matter to me. I can tell you, I had a childhood in the 50s and 60s, which I happen to think were the best years of this country, because the men and women of World War II suffered such hardship and loss that it rooted them in different values that I benefited from. And
Yes.
that went on, I believe, into the 70s, 1980. We got invested in Wall Street, where money took over the thought process on a daily basis of everybody in this country. We became preoccupied with it, and it's harmed our
Right.
country. You know,
Right.
but I wish I could arbitrate what you're saying. And you want me to tell you something worse? I'm talking to more and more people that agree with your thinking about not bringing children into this world. This is a dark, ugly, dirty place, and it's incumbent upon us to make it better before you leave. Try just embracing this concept in Washington. They don't
Right.
even think on these simplistic a term. They don't think
No,
about
they
what
don't.
they say before they say it and what it will translate to, or what they do before they do it and what it will translate to. And more importantly, how it will impact our children. I want to say one thing as I continue to run on with you. I started to glance at the Build Back Better bill, right? Which has concerns about farming and other things that have nothing to do with our children. But our children's concerns and legislation important to our children are commingled in this bill.
Yeah.
This is the political mechanism we have.
Oh, yeah.
I almost don't know what to say as to how stupid we are, but I guess we cornered the market on it. This is shameful. I listened to Jen Psaki the other day talk about how the Democrats were holding up monies that we needed to allocate for COVID as it was commingled in an immigration bill. Why isn't COVID funding separated? Why isn't it introduced as independent, separate legislation to the House, then to the Senate, and signed by the president? The same way everything should be done when it deals with our children, our veterans, our elderly, our homeless, our mentally ill. Please, if you have the answer to this, please give it to me, because I don't understand this. I'm not the brightest guy on the planet, Sarah, but I didn't fall off the back of an Apple truck either.
Right.
I mean, this is like an insult to my intelligence and my decency. I could run this government with my eyes closed. All you have to do is separate this thirst of money and start to put your thinking process in place that's going to take care of our people, starting with our children. You agree with me? Disagree with me?
I agree with that, because I feel like, I think it's almost half of our money goes towards the military industrial complex, when instead of spending money on war, we could spend it on maybe health and education, things that kept people alive and thriving. That would be a huge change I would like to see anyway.
Sarah, I have to say to you, I wish we lived in a world where we could embrace that, but I don't understand why we can't spend it on both, because we seem to be able to throw money around on this planet like it's going out of style. Sadly, the reality of this world is kind of similar to the discussion we're having about bringing children in. The truth just is what the truth is. And we need to have a strong military presence, tragically, which is an indictment of mankind. I said earlier, we have this predisposition towards destroying each other. We're witnessing it right now in the Ukraine. We have witnessed it throughout the history of time. But I agree with you. Let's take all of that other monies that they seem to have in massive amounts that they dole out to countries that hate us, and invest it into our own society, our children, our elderly, etc. It can be done. It's just that they live in a bubble in D.C. I've been there. I've worked there. I've been around this mentality of people. They're in a cocoon. I don't know how else to say it to you, Sarah. But you're right. We need to start to take care of our people better. I can't argue with you one bit. I do want to ask you this. Are you your political affiliation? Are you Democrat, Republican, Independent? Where do you sit with that?
I consider myself an anarchist. I don't
I like you even
agree
more.
I don't agree with either party. I think they're both the same.
That doesn't make you an anarchist, though.
No,
don't label yourself or define yourself that way, because they'll take advantage of it. I consider yourself to be a fairly clear thinker.
Yeah, I mean, I just choose to live by my own rules, because I feel like I can assert for myself my own personal freedoms, and that is in my own mind, and I don't need anything to do that.
Stick with me, Sara. I'm coming right back to you. We're going to take a quick break.
Okay.
We're going to continue this conversation because you're onto something big. Guys, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back, guys.
Okay.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. I have a very intuitive, insightful young lady on the phone, Sara from Cape Cod, a native, I might note. She's living in what's almost like God's country up there. I've been there. But Sara, you're spot on to a lot of things here. You've obviously taken the liberty of thinking through a lot of, I would say, let me go beyond the surface of what's been put before us. You're thinking beyond that. And you're right. Your points of view, your observations, your insights are 100% on. You sound very grounded. But I'm going to ask you to please do me a favor. Don't define yourself for anybody again. See, I don't let people define me. I don't let people tell me I'm of a certain age and you're older. You know, my attitude is if you want to grow old by yourself. I don't have the luxury. Don't tell me I'm a Democrat, a Republican, because I'm neither one. I'm an American. My loyalties are not to a political agenda, but to this country and my children. I think you'll agree with that. You're not an anarchist. You're a lover of this country and a lover of life, and you're seeking truth and balance and justice. That doesn't make you an anarchist. That makes you someone that the planet needs. Now, I didn't mean to scold you.
I mean,
I'm sorry I scolded you, Sara.
I don't feel scolded. I just think that there are a lot of popular misconceptions constructed by media about what an anarchist actually is. First of all, there's a lot of, like, especially a part of these, like, younger people that are, burning trash cans and crap like that, that are just really angry with their parents and feel like they have something to prove, and this is a good way to stick it to the man.
I want you, wait, Sara, let me interrupt you. I want you to give me your definition of anarchist then.
Anarchy is freedom from government, period. And granted, I live in a capitalist society with, that's supposed to be a democratic republic. It's run like a corporate plutocracy. So basically, all I'm saying is I still have to play the game in order to have, the freedoms to use roads, the freedom to travel, things like that.
But there's a balance there that you're looking for, and you're right.
Right.
And Sara, you're not the only person that feels this way. You know, the government needs to step away and allow the people to live their lives independent of this ridiculous level of oversight today. We're being told what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. And I want to just touch on another very serious topic that I think that you'll appreciate. We are in a very broad sense, questioning the legitimacy of things that come from the government. We're questioning the agenda. We're questioning the motive. We're questioning the politics that are attached. And we shouldn't be living this way. We should be able to believe and trust our government. Providing our government believes and trusts us and understands that they need to allow us to live the way we were intended to live by the founding fathers. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, but I also feel like in a progressive society that we also need to implement changes as time goes on, because, the whole tribal mentality of people initiates that those changes have to be made to a certain extent. If you see things aren't going good in your own country, like, why are we interfering in other people's countries
I agree 100%.
We have our own problems?
You're absolutely right. Do your own laundry first. But, you just used an interesting phrase. You said, changing times, how things are changing. I want to ask you a question. And I will respect your response regardless of what it is, because I have my own view. What do you think about building a wall across the southern border of this country because of a concern of national security? What's your feeling on that?
I feel like, personally, I think a lot of world leaders do things that serve their own purposes, honestly. I don't agree with borders anywhere. I feel like anyone should be able to travel wherever they want to.
Even with even with the concern for security that we're living with today?
I think that a lot of our own problems come from our own country.
Self-inflicted.
To be honest.
You're absolutely right, Sara. Absolutely right. Self-inflicted. But, part of the discussion is about the demographic in this country that doesn't participate in that self-infliction. You see, I think in a perfect world, we should be able to travel freely also. I agree 100% with you. But I am concerned about the future and the safety of this country. I have to say this to you, Sara. We're having a hard time taking care of our own people right now, and I think you would agree with that, and you alluded to that. We're letting millions of more people in that we have to take care of now, and someone has to pay for that. You see, so,
That's correct.
And so as much as I would like to say the borders could be open in a perfect world, and at one time, Sara, they were. But you mentioned, times have changed, and we must change with the times. And I'm not abandoning the immigration process. I just think we need to do it with a little bit more rhyme and reason than we are just somewhat in an arbitrarial manner.
Might be so, but I think a lot of the stuff that keeps us in a fear mentality has to do with media and media construction for political gain in a lot of circumstances. So
I agree with you, Sara.
So I don't think, I've heard a lot of different political affiliations speak on these matters, and all I hear is a lot of fear and parroting from different media sources.
Yeah. You know what I want to say, Sara, real quick? You're onto it again. The media is creating your narrative and your optic.
Yes.
And look, and this is why I also say we need what I refer to as media oversight. Sara, I have to let you go right now. I've got to go to a break, and I've got to move on to emails. But I heavily encourage you to call back in, because these are ideas, these are thoughts that people need to start to hear in this country. You're a lot more purist in your thinking than I think most people are prepared for. And I'm actually trying to come at this problem-solving aspect the same way you are. You'd be shocked as how aligned our thinking is. Guys, I'm going to have to take a quick break and unfortunately end this conversation with Sara, whom I hope you call me back again on a weekly basis.
All right.
And you know what? You can call me in the afternoons, Monday and Tuesday. I have a live radio show in Jacksonville. It's 600 AM or 101.1 FM. It's live at 5 o'clock, and these are ideas that people need to start to listen to here about the government and how you feel about things, because you're spot on. Guys, we'll be right back. Sara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou. It was nice talking with you.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'll be right back, guys. We're back again, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go into an email from Eric in Asheville, North Carolina. Joe Biden announced new steps aimed at regulating so-called ghost guns as use of untraceable homemade weapons in violent crimes rises. What's your take on this, and can you explain a little bit more about it for those who think ghost guns are for shooting the Marshmallow Man? Interesting. Well, what the president did was he signed an order banning ghost guns, period. A ghost gun, and I'll explain it to you as simplistically as I can. It's a frame. It's a replication of a semi-automatic pistol's frame called Glock. It is just a piece of plastic. There are no internal parts such as locking blocks, trigger springs, slide latches, any number of these little metal parts that when you insert them, change that platform from a mere piece of plastic into what we call a receiver or a lower, which is now regulated by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and requires a serial number. That's what a ghost gun is. That's the inception. What you now do is you take this piece of plastic frame, you put in the internal parts, which makes it a lower, makes it a gun, and then you can go out somewhat arbitrarily on the internet or through manufacturers and buy a slide that marries up to it and causes the firearm to work. It's that simple. They are unfortunately being recovered in mass numbers in criminal acts up in New York, for example, of which I'm intimately familiar with. It is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. It wasn't a problem until it became a problem, and now it is a problem. And to be very candid with you, I have to agree with what the president just did. We have plenty of firearms in this country. And the thing I will tell you that is somewhat common to the acquisition of the ghost gun is the criminal element. They're being used in the commission of crimes by the criminal element. Good people aren't using ghost guns to commit crimes, once again. But unfortunately, sometimes the good pay for the misdeeds of the bad, and this is an instance of this. I happen to have a firearm accessible, and I could really break it down and show it to you in more plain and raw terms. But this notion of ghost guns or guns that are being produced 3D, for example, off computers, are just ill-conceived. This is not the direction we should be thinking. Unfortunately, in having discussions with people who have acquired ghost guns, who are legal-minded, they're just concerned that the government's going to come and take their guns, which, by the way, I reassure you, is never going to happen. We do not have enough law enforcement agents. We don't have enough military. We don't have the stomach nor the resolve. We're just throwing words around once again to juice up the public and cause some division and animosity and divide, instead of sitting down and tackling a very, very important topic: gun management. I don't even like the word control. No one likes this word control. Gun management. We need to induce the public into understanding. We need a vetting process that prevents the mentally ill and emotionally disturbed individuals from getting guns. We need to mandate training with the firearm, and equally as important, an education in the law as to when you may or may not use force in general, no less deadly physical forces, which is what a firearm's capable of causing. You know, you need to know the law, that if you brandish a gun, you're breaking the law. You can be arrested and lose your privilege to own a gun. There's a big discussion about education here, folks. It's not taking place with anybody responsible on this planet, because they're all worried about, I guess, the back nine on Pebble Beach. I don't know what the hell they're concerned with. But I can assure you that these ghost guns aren't for the purpose of shooting Marshmallow Man. These are the real deal. They are also not ghost guns. They're called Polymer 80. That's the legitimate manufacturer's reference to this particular product. But it's a plastic frame. All it is a pure plastic frame configured like a Glock handgun lower. No reflection on Glock. They just happen to duplicate this because Glock is recognized as one of the finest combat weapons that's ever been developed because of its simplicity. Not to go into detail, it requires 33 moving parts as opposed to twice as many by its competitors. Less is more. It's a really simplistic firearm. If you ever were bored, go study the history of Gaston Glock, who was in polymers and cutlery. He was licensed by the Austrian government to develop a firearm for him. This was the byproduct. As simplistic as it is, makes it that much more simplistic to replicate. That's what we're dealing with. But the frame unto itself alone, plastic, form, is illegal. I don't know how they're going to make that fly. I don't know how you take something that's plastic in a configuration and outlaw it, because we don't know how to enforce the law. You see, this goes back once again to a lack of enforcement. We have plenty of laws. We have plenty of restrictions. By the way, when you find someone using a firearm in the commission of a crime, you must incarcerate them. It would help you if you just embrace the very basic concept of enforcement. I hope that answers the question. I want to move on to another email. Cameron from Waco, Texas asks, Russian forces have vacated the surrounding Chernobyl, but Ukrainian officials are now sounding the alarm. Troops were likely to be exposed to high amounts of radiation after they intentionally disturbed the radioactive dust in the Red Forest. Drone footage showed that trenches were also dug in contaminated areas throughout the exclusion zone. Is this cause for alarm? How could they be so careless? Well, to answer the last part is how could they be so careless? It's Russia. They deal with reckless abandon. It's a very simple answer. They just don't care. Carelessness is their forte. You just have to witness in a very general sense what's transpiring in the Ukraine. As far as moving away from Chernobyl, that's probably a tell. They probably realize that they've, disturbed some elements in the atmosphere or in that environment that are harmful to many. This is not real deep thinking here. When they abandoned Chernobyl, as we know historically, believed back in the 80s, it had a meltdown. It had a dramatic impact on Finland and some of the other countries that are contiguous to Russia in that area. This whole undertaking in the Ukraine is just careless. Let's not limit it to how they managed Chernobyl. It's careless, it's reckless, it shows indifference towards human life. It has a very blind and distorted agenda. Why should Chernobyl and the management thereof be any different than a general approach to Ukraine by the Russians? and Putin. I don't get what people don't get here. But the fact that they've abandoned it should give you a good cause. So hopefully that answered that question for you today. I'm going to make a few other closing comments. I listened to the press secretary, Jen Psaki, in an exchange with Dana Perino, who was a former press secretary under Bush, about the borders and finally acknowledging that the borders are broken. She mentioned it a couple of times during this interview. I have one simple question. I defy anybody in the audience listening or anyone on the planet who you might want to ask me, or I want to ask them. Tell me one thing that this political entity has done to address the broken border. One thing, folks. If you go to our website at betweenthelines.tv, you can link on and go to this show on a national basis as well. It's a radio show, 5 o'clock Monday and Tuesday every week. It's 600 AM, 101.1 FM, and there is a way to link into this show by going to our website, as I mentioned a moment ago. You can listen to it live anywhere in the nation. Thank you for joining us today.